And when I talk about the self, I found it useful to kind of split the self into two aspects. And so I talk about the self in terms of a functional self and a claiming self. So the functional self is that which is associated with the body and the mind, that knows its name, that has a history, right, that does things. And so we can call that the functional self, and that self is necessary for the functioning of the organism. And we don't want to get rid of that, because if we get rid of that self, then we cease being able to function, and we get institutionalized, or at best. So what we're talking about, what I'm talking about in terms of the aspect of the self that A, brings suffering, and B, disappears in a deeper understanding or enlightenment, is this false self, what I call the false sense of authorship, which is a quality of the organism, of the human organism, that develops in all human beings at the age of 2.5 years old. It's just a phenomenon that occurs, regardless of culture, regardless of race, regardless of religion, regardless of whether it's a primitive society or whether it's a so-called advanced society. It makes no difference. That around the age of 2.5 develops this sense that I, as this body, am an independent entity, independent of everything else, and that I am capable, from my own independent powers, of making things happen. And it's a very strong sense. And it is a shared sense. It's a sense that is shared by most human beings. And so, and when the child develops this sense, his parents say, basically, of course you're independent, of course you're powerful, of course you are capable of, from your own independent power, doing things, controlling things. And this is further reinforced in the schools and in the churches and all the way down the line. So it's the prevailing and predominant notion in human society that we are separate and independent authoring entities. And in most people, they go through their entire lives without ever questioning it, simply accepted as the way things are. In a very few cases, there is something that happens that brings this into question. Often it's associated with something very traumatic, a near-death experience, a profound illness, a loss, a horrible emotional or physical loss. Something dramatic often stimulates an opportunity, a shifting, a crack, if you will, in this predominant notion of independence and separateness. And it is that which we can say is the point at which people become seekers, spiritual seekers, that they become interested in looking at an alternative approach to understanding themselves and the world. This particular teaching is amongst the most radical of the quote spiritual teachings. Most of them gentle you in. Say, okay, do this, practice this, look at this, And then after you do that for a while, maybe you'll gain, this insight that, we'll talk about that. This particular teaching has nothing against such practices and has nothing against anything, but it starts at the point of examining this fundamental question. Are we separate, independent, authoring entities? And blessedly, this teaching doesn't provide an answer. It doesn't say yes or no. It says, if you're curious, look deeper. And points in various places where you might look. And that's basically what this teaching is about.